1-year mark.
Woohoo!
The last time when we had this meeting last year. So kudos to everyone. Obviously, it's been an extremely difficult year for everyone from different aspects, and we've sort of pulled through with the program, with the broader community. So pat on the back for everyone. We're going to change things a bit today in terms of scheduling, just to manage things. So we're going to start off with the knowledge sharing session, then the general updates, and then get back to the original flow of items. But before we start off, quick reminder to everyone, we are all here together in honor and memory of Jitesh Raj Periyasamy. Want to make sure, just reiterating the mission statement, right, to nudge students towards achieving clarity about their strengths and passion. Our vision is to bring together and nurture a lineage of leaders and change makers for the betterment of the community and society. Quick refresher of the D&I statement. I won't be going through that for this particular session. We have our accessibility statement. This presentation will be available in the regular document, the drive that we have. Rules of engagement. Hopefully everyone's aware of this, but just reiterating, do not assume pronouns. Say your pronouns when you speak for the first time, which I didn't do, which is, for me, it's he and him. And use the queue to pitch in. Anyone volunteering to be the queue master for today?
I'll do.
Himanshi, is that you?
Yes, that's me.
Well, thanks a lot, Himanshi. And similarly, who would like to take the minutes of today's meeting?
Yeah, I can take the minutes.
Nankeshwar, that's you, right?
Yeah.
Cool. I can't see people right now because of the screen share, so I'm just guessing with your voices. Thanks a lot, Nandakishore. With that, here's a quick agenda, but we'll quickly switch over to the knowledge sharing session up front, for which I will be handing over to Kishore, who has volunteered to run it for us. Kishore, over to you.
Okay, hey guys, so hey all, this is Kishore, and you can address me as he, him, his. So today's topic of discussion would be automating racism, or how we have automated racism in the past. So yeah, Vivek, you can switch to the slides. Yeah, so I chose this topic since we are living amidst automation and a data-driven world today, and it's important for us to know, that the missions that we build today are not creating a new society, but merely replicating the existing one and the discriminatory patterns that are embedded inside. So it can extend sexism, classism, and racism. So all that we will be doing in this particular knowledge sharing session will be examining the disturbing prejudices existing in missions and how such biases impact, different sectors such as hiring, housing, criminal profiling, and etc. So Vivek, if you can move on to the next slide. So I've just broken this down broadly into unintentional racism and then intentional racism, and under unintentional racism, how we gather data, how we utilize the data available, and then the human subjectivity. As I mentioned, it's an extrapolation of the way that we are as a society. So before I move on to the slides, if I can share my screen, I have a few quick exercises, very interesting exercises to show. So let me try sharing my screen. Yeah, let me know if you can see it. Is it visible? Yeah. All right, okay, perfect. So this is the basic Twitter dashboard. So let me upload an image and I'll show you what image this is. So this is an image of a prominent black and white personality. And so these are the various cropping options that we have. And this one is basically automated cropping. So for the preview, it crops automatically to fit the standard size of Twitter's post. So I'll just leave it at this so that it does it automatically, and let's see what happens. So let me see. So if you have a look, we see the white face here, and you may just think that it's because it's at the bottom or something like that. So I just have another example where it's basically the same picture, but the order of these two phases have been swapped. So it is the black personality at the bottom and the white personality at the top. And interestingly, is again the white person that is in focus, even though the picture has both black and white personalities. And it focuses exactly on a face. So let me just quickly delete these posts so that I don't get into trouble. So this has been identified in the past, and this has been even gone to the notice of Twitter, and they say it is a problem in their cropping algorithm they use, and we look into more of that in future. But I have another interesting piece of tech. So here, this is a text generation API where you give it a prompt and it generates a story or a larger text for you. So everything is randomized. So if I'm going to give the same prompt another time, it's going to be different. But I was just trying it a few times, and most of the times it was related to violence. And if you'd seen, it's just 3 words. So which does not really indicate anything. Let's try it again. And as you can see, it is related to violence in the first para. So majority of the time is related to violence. It may differ or may not. In some cases, I think this is fine. It talks about faith and religion in specific. Yeah, so this has again as suicide, and again has a lot of violence. So you can try this out for yourself. It's very interesting that the majority of the time is related to violence. And so that would be about my screen share. So let's look at why this is. So it is a very prominent problem, and everybody knows it exists, but we still come across these problems. And we will go into the reasons in further slides. So let's talk about what is unintentional racism, right? So in the case of Twitter that we saw, the reason that they gave was because of their saliency prediction model that they use for cropping. So where an algorithm uses saliency dataset and documents people's eye movement. So based on people's eye movement and where their eyes focus on for a longer period of time, it guesses what is important in a particular picture. And it just so happened that people focused on white personnel more, or that is what Twitter says. So we come into a very interesting, so as you can see in the picture here, even though at the center of the picture, we have a black lady, the saliency is only 13.89%, whereas in comparison, it's lower to the other 2 people standing beside her, beside the person. So this is just a proof of concept. You go to the next slide, right? So looking at the data utilized, so the first problem could be that the data that we utilize itself could be biased. And this is called AI bias, which is the underlying prejudice in the data that is used to create these AI algorithms. So one example is Compass, which is used in the US court systems to predict the likelihood of a defendant reoffending or committing the crime again. So the reason that the data was skewed, and I'll tell you why it was skewed and how it was skewed. So the model was chosen, and then the process of creating algorithm overall ended up predicting twice as many false positives for recidivism, which is the concept where it's the tendency for a person to reoffend. And we see that there were twice as many false positives for black offenders, which is 45%, than white offenders, which was 23%. And the reason was because of a lack of representative data set. And this was used as a reference to make judgments in the past. So it was in process and in progress. It was in utilization when this particular bias was found out. So this was because there was a lack of representative data set, but it may not always be the data utilized, but it may also be the data available. And you can go to the next slide. So as you saw in the previous example, that was just one of the many data-driven services that perpetuates this discrimination and the disparity. So the second one is the example of Amazon. And we see that history is hard-coded in data. And in the case of Amazon, as you can see, the Amazon realized that the algorithm used for hiring employees was found biased against women. So the reason was because the algorithm was based on the number of resumes submitted over the past 10 years. And since most applicants were men in the history of applications, it was trained to favor men over women. So here the bias was because of the history of the prevalent prejudice. Maybe it was due to institutional it may be institutional patriarchy, or maybe due to other host of reasons. But the history says they have received more applications from men. So the algorithm itself favored applications of men over women. Go to the next slide. But sometimes it's also human subjectivity that gets embedded into data itself. For example, since we have no objective measure of crime, there is some amount of racial profiling involved because it depends on the decisions taken by judges in the past. It depends on the police officers who were recruited in the past. There's no objective measure of crime. So you just can't use crime data and feed it into a model and expect it to give the right outcomes. So the racial, another example is that in 2019, the researchers found out that an algorithm that was used on more than 200 million people in the US hospital was racially biased. So it was used to predict which patients would, likely need extra medical care. And it heavily favored white patients over black patients. And here the reason was very interesting. It was not because of the race as a variable itself, but it was because of another variable that was highly correlated with race. And this variable was the healthcare cost history. Again, this was a history that was in place, but I'll tell you how it is human subjectivity later on. So since predominantly over the history of healthcare, Black people were given less amount of healthcare subsidy or cost allocated for healthcare, the model itself predicted that they were of low risk. So it highly correlated risk scores to the healthcare cost history. So, and this may be due to the lack of access to insurance, or it may be due to the institutional racism itself. But then the model didn't know all of that. So why is it? Why is it human subjectivity and it's not just a history? It's because this was rectified, and this bias was brought down to 80%. So the problem was this: the issue was unnoticed, and the common men who were the product of this system, they didn't know why they were not given certain grants, and the people who made the software didn't have a second glance as to if that is a bias or not. So it was just humans who overlooked the matter, and when they did probe into it, they were able to rectify it and reduce it. So it may be due to human subjectivity as well. So all of this was just, and also to give an example for all the CS folks here, this is similar to the starvation of process that we see in job scheduling, right? So we initially think the job need not be processed now, and then we put it aside for later. And since it's been aside for a long time, we don't want to pick it up again. So it just continues to starve and it continues to not be processed until it accumulates over time. So similar was the case in this place. So all the examples that we saw up until now was, kind of unintentional racism that, subtly it was embedded into the technologies that we built. It was not very intentional. But Vivek, if you can move to the next slide. It's very interesting to see that there have been cases of intentional racism as well. So the Chinese government is known for its discrimination against ethnic Muslims, and it's known for holding over 1 million of them in detention camps. So according to a New York Times articles, the authorities have been using a secret system of facial recognition technology to track and control Uyghurs. So this is a largely Muslim minority. So the Chinese government uses advanced facial recognition software to track the movement of Uyghurs, not just to track the movement, but also to identify the location and the activities of this Muslim minority. So it has been integrated into the surveillance cameras in China, and it looks exclusively for Uyghurs, not just any minority. It looks exclusively for Uyghurs, and we understand that that it's not just restricted to this particular prejudice is not just restricted to skin color. It can also extend to discrimination based on ethnicity or race or any specific background. So you can use tech as a propeller for racism in specific. So China specifically has set aside billions of dollars under 2 government plans that are called Skynet and Sharp Eyes. Both of these are specifically for targeting this Muslim minority. And so you may be thinking, it's just monitoring. There's no harm in it, but actually the problem is about social control. So in the past, we've seen Beijing through hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities into what they call as re-education camps for 3 to 6 months. And these places are historically known to be place for brainwashing, torture, and punishment, and in a way teaching what the traditional Chinese values are to these Muslim minorities. So we've identified the problem here. So what exactly can be the conclusion? Vivek, if you can move to the next slide. So yeah, so there's no overarching solution to this issue. So although rules and laws would be helpful, it might take a significant amount of time to establish them in these emerging fields. For example, AI does not still have hard enforced rules because it's still a black box, and the people who build it itself are very unsure as to why the results are the way they are. So you can only retrace to a certain extent. So honestly, it just comes down to individuals being mindful about the possibility and the existence of these racial discriminations. So, and we can choose whether we need a prediction algorithm or not in the first place, in places where human prediction itself would suffice. And finally, it's important to understand that we're not just passive spectators in the story of AI, but authors of it. And we are both a data point and a product of the system. So since we are moving towards society that is data driven primarily, we will be authors of it at some point of time. So it's important that we're mindful that it's not prejudiced and biased. So yeah, that's about it. I can take any questions if you want any interesting questions. Okay, I see now in the chat. If that's it, yeah, that would be it for me.